Right, yeah, thanks guys. I've talked to a couple of you tonight. I do a few talks. I did some last year, and I've done in the last 8 days 4 talks. So if I do pass out with exhaustion, you know why. I do like to preload my talks with some excuses. So now that's done, got on with some admin. My name's Stuart Hoff. I'm Senior Consultant at XAM. I've been working in this industry for 20 years. I started off as a web developer in the early noughties, which was a wonderful time. Security wasn't really something that we cared about unless, well, if you did, you'd switch JavaScript off in your browser. And obviously that's changed quite a lot now. But over the last 5 years, I've worked closely with cybersecurity professionals. Have we got any cybersecurity professionals in the room? Good, no one's going to argue with me. I've been working with them to build a better relationship between developers, ourselves, and the security consultants and professionals that we have to deal with, because as I found, there's a bit of a divide there. They like to tell us that we're doing it badly, and we like to argue with them that we're doing it properly, and nothing really gels nicely. They don't help us all that much, and we hate them. So what I've tried to do is make a better relationship and educate developers in how to be more secure. There's a couple of links there if you want to connect with me. I'm happy to have more discussion outside of this. It's one of my passions, so I do tend to talk quite a lot about it. Yeah, as Brendan said, the pizza's sponsored by XAM. And at XAM, we started off with mobile applications, and we've grown to design and web applications and technical consulting and managing solutions for our clients. And we're always looking for the next best person to join our team. So if that's going to be you, then please do speak to me afterwards. Now, when I agreed to do this talk, it was earlier this year, quite a long way back. And I was quite happy to do it and to be accepted. And then more recently, it was announced. And it was announced that I was doing the top 10 recommendations. I'd forgotten that I'd said 10. So there you go. That's it. So my number one recommendation is always OWASP. Now, who knows what it stands for? I don't know whether this is like a Mandela effect. I thought it was the Open Web Application Security Project.
Correct, that's my understanding, yeah.
It's the Open Worldwide Application Security Project. I don't know whether that's changed.
Backronym, they've changed it.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a reason for that, because they do more than just web applications now. But yeah, so the top 10 is the top 10 critical risks to applications, not just web. And late 2021 was the first time injection wasn't the top. So it's always been injection, SQL injection or code injection, remote code execution, that sort of thing. But it became broken access control. And if you look at some of the case studies that I've covered from last year, and I won't name any names, but it was definitely breaches caused by broken access control. So you can see that the OWASP top 10 does change. So they review it, and they find all the analysis that they need out in the real world, and they make their recommendations based on that. But it's not just these are the things to look for. They do give you mitigations as well. They help you to go against these risks and stop them from being actual threats to your systems. But because it's a top 10, that infers that there's more than 10. So don't stop when you get to 10 and think, right, that's me secure. They also recommend looking at code quality issues, which is prevalent, but something that I will discuss later on. Denial of service attacks. And again, there's plenty of tools to mitigate that. And memory management errors. They're the 3 that they suggest that you also look at along with the top 10. But OWASP isn't just the top 10. That's what they're probably famous for. But they do have a load of other projects that will help you. And as I said, there's mobile application security. So they've added that. That's why they're not web anymore, just web. But so you've got dependency track. Now I know that some people are talking today about managing your third-party libraries and understanding whether they are vulnerable or tested, etc. Dependency track's going to help you to do that. That's going to allow you to have your supply chain risk identification for your organization, help you to reduce those vulnerabilities, because it's impossible to keep track of that yourself, right? I mean, you know, your node modules folder is probably bigger than you want it to be, bigger than you know your computer wants it to be. So having that as a project to help you is, and it's free, is a massive boon. Juice Shop is my favorite because it is a vulnerable website, and I think, well, somebody else can make a vulnerable website. And what it does is it helps you to understand the attacks. So if you understand the attacks, then you'll know, hopefully, how to prevent them from being real on your system. And the Juice Shop is showing you everything that's in the OWASP top 10. And it's also fun. It's a fun thing to do. You might know about capture the flag events, where you or a team of people will try and break into a server or a website and find a hidden flag. And it's the same sort of thing as that. Now, last year I did this for XAM. We had one night that I'd created a lot of vulnerable websites, because that's the thing I do, unless the clients are asking. They were tasked in teams to go and get as many flags as possible. And it was good fun. It was an eye-opener because I'd spent, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks every night building these applications and servers and working out the ways to create them as puzzles. And about 20% were found. So it made me aware that even within my organization, there's a lack of knowledge on certain areas. It didn't help that they're all mobile app developers and I was doing websites, but it is an eye-opener, as I said, for us as software developers, what we actually know. There's some more there. So the mobile application security, which is a security standard and testing guide for mobile apps. The mod security core rule set. We know what mod security is. Web application firewall. So it's a rule set for the mod security web application firewall. It does work with compatible ones as well, but I will talk about another web application firewall tonight. The security assurance maturity model. I can't speak on behalf of this one. I've not used it, but it sounds really good. For an organization, it's about identifying the current security processes or flaws that you've got, and then building a program to cover those as a security assurance program. The security knowledge framework is a multi-language framework for secure coding. So they'll probably have the language that you're using, and you'll be able to learn more about secure coding, which again is something that's super important for us as developers to, you know, stick it to the cybersecurity guys. The web security testing guide is a testing guide for web security. Again, I've not used this, but I certainly do need to, because it helps us to have that full understanding about how we test against security vulnerabilities. And then the Z Attack Proxy is a free web security tool, and it's maintained by volunteers. I'm told that they're very intelligent. So the key point there is it's free, and a great tool to help you to nail down your security. All right, that's point 1 done. Are there any questions? I'll stop between each point for questions rather than waiting until right at the end.
site or something that you
Yeah. As I understand it,
into your website and tries to find all
it's
these sort of
yeah,
particular vulnerabilities.
it's like an automated pen tester tool.
Listening on-
Sorry, yeah. So what is the ZAP? It's called the Z Attack Proxy. Yeah, it's a tool that's like an automated pen tester for your application. So rather than someone, you can configure it and you can point it in the right direction, and off it goes and iterates and does whatever else it does. Any more questions? No? Okay. So authentication and authorization is something that we probably know a great deal about. They're often talked about, like I just did, with an "and" in the middle, but they're very different things. Authentication is about proving your identity or proving an identity, and authorization is what you're allowed to do. So there's a few points that I've put up here that are around both those topics. The first up is tokens, and we probably use tokens now, hopefully, instead of storing credentials. But what I found is some people don't realize, because a token is just gobbledygook, it's sort of characters in a massive long string. But some people think that makes it secure, and it doesn't, because it's encoded, it's not encrypted. So you can take that token and you can find out what's in it. So don't put sensitive data in a token, because if somebody else gets it, then they get that data. Pretty straightforward. Misconfiguration can lead to broken access control, and that's kind of key here. So when and this is carrying on from tokens, if you use JWT, or I've heard it called JOT tokens, I can't get on board with that. No, yeah, good, we're in agreement. So JWT has a verified hash, so a signature, and if you know the key, then you can change it and send it back. So to prevent token forgery, we keep that key a secret. And so managing that secret, that is where it can be part of misconfiguration. And one of the things that I did last year was made sure that the teams could find keys to do some token forgery. And that's as simple as what we see quite often is people not realizing that what they're uploading is in the public domain, right? So they might do a backup and zip it up and put it in their source control, and then the source control is out there in the cloud and people can just get that backup, and yeah, it leads to a lot of distress. Okay, moving on. We've discussed this tonight as well. Don't reinvent the wheel. There's probably opinions on it about using packages versus not using packages, but there's a lot out there that already exists. So authentication and authorization is definitely in this space. So we don't need to create our own unless that is a requirement for heavy customization. We've got existing authentication providers available that are world-class, and we can make use of those. Now, I'm giving you today my top 10 recommendations, and I'm talking about authentication and authorization, but you don't need to have that deep knowledge of this subject. You just need to know what's available and how to use it. And I will talk about a bit later on as well. So this fourth point on the board there, require authorization by default. This is something that I've tried to instill in API endpoints. So we can use authorization on controllers and on endpoints, right? And we should default to authorize. And then on the endpoint that we don't need authorization for, we can allow public access or allow anonymous, right? That should be what we do, rather than only say that this one's authorized only, because that way we don't fall into the trap of accidentally putting out an endpoint that doesn't have any access control on it, and it has lots of people's data behind it. And then lastly, applying access management to business logic. So we do authorization, we can do that on the endpoint. We've got middleware to do it as well. but we should also have that on the business logic. So when you get to your business logic behind the endpoints, we should be verifying that this request is allowed to do what it says it can. And that's part of the zero trust principles. And again, I'm going to talk about that later. So here's some authentication providers, not an exhaustive list, but Auth0 is probably the most popular. Azure has single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, B2B, B2C, and some others, using OpenID Connect, which is layered on top of OAuth 2.0. And then there's Firebase and Cognito, which again, they both have free tiers, they have great documentation and so on, but they're not Azure, so I don't know a great deal about them. Any questions on Auth and Auth?
What are the pros and cons of some of the different Auth providers? Like how do you...
So that's a great question. What are the pros and cons for the different providers? Now, Okta, I talked about last year, and I was talking about data breaches, and they were very kindly one of the sponsors at DDD Brisbane, and they had a breach that year. Now, the reason I bring that up is because when an organisation has a breach and they weather it, they learn from it. I had a case study on Equifax, who had a humongous data breach in 2017. And last year, Optus had a data breach, and they were offering their clients or their customers free credit checks, so that their customers could see if somebody had used their data. And they used Equifax to provide that. And it got a big laugh because, you know, oh, isn't that ironic? But Equifax were fined $575 million US for that breach. A lot of people say that's not enough. But their total spend, including that amount, to make their systems better was 1.4 billion. So they spent more than they were fined in making their systems much better. So that's why I brought that up. So Okta are really good. That's why they're the most popular. That's why they're world class, is because they've learned from their mistakes and they've carried on. Obviously, Azure has its benefits for a .NET user group because it's built on Microsoft, and we can plug into that quite easily. But between the top three, so Firebase and Google and Cognito from AWS and Azure, these days they all work with each other. They've all got pretty good free tiers. They've all got great documentation. So out of those three, if you're going to choose, you'd probably be hitting your favorite brand, in my opinion. There's probably people that would argue with me, and I'm welcome to have that discussion, but for me, it's your preference. Any more?
Does Okta have similar feature like Azure B2C?
Yeah. So Auth0 is, they're all very similar. So you've got single sign-on capabilities, and it's cloud-based. You know, if you to put a grid with these what they each have, then they all have ticks. They all do the same, basically have the same features and so on. But as I said before, choose one and then know it. Okay, so business logic validation. This is something as early on as a web developer I learned, and that's users don't do what I want them to do. And so you need to have some validation. But there are two different sides of validation. You've got client-side validation, which isn't secure, and then you've got server-side validation, which is where the security is. And they basically have two different objectives. Your client-side validation is, one, to help your user have a nice experience so they don't get frustrated, and two, to minimize the round trips. You know, you don't want to be bothering your server and using resource there. if you know already that it's not going to do anything. Your server-side validation is where you put your security, because you can validate against authorization and you can validate against attacks. One of the big vulnerabilities that I discovered a long time ago was something called mass assignment vulnerability. Got a whoop for that? No? Anyone know what mass assignment vulnerability is? I'm sure you do. You're just being shy. So if you have a model, and the one that they give you as an example is so garbage, but I'll do it as well because it's there. So if you have a user model and you've got someone logged in, and they can update their user model, but you can have different types of users, so they've got different roles, and one of the roles is admin, and you have your UI that doesn't have the role on it, but they can save their user state, their profile. If you haven't got security against that model, then somebody can replay that request and add in the admin model to that, and then your backend might, if it isn't written properly, persist that and give them admin access. That's called a mass assignment vulnerability. So when you're using a model in the back end for lots of stuff, and you reuse it in that transfer between the UI and your backend, you can sometimes get results that are unexpected if someone's going to attack. The other side of this is that I also learned that users aren't going to attack your system generally. And as a developer, and you build your UI, and this is how you're going to use it, and you put your validation in to make sure that nothing untoward goes to your backend, and then you realize that actually real attackers, they get rid of your UI, and they use tools that just hit the backend directly. Everything that you've done in your UI to make it secure is irrelevant. So that's part of the mindset change of how secure your system is, because ultimately, if you're going to be attacked, they're not going to use what you give them. They're going to use tools that they get off the dark web, or tools that they write themselves. And there's quite a few different types of attackers, which I haven't covered in this, but the ones that you need to be aware of are the ones that actually target you, not just fall upon a vulnerability that you've got. So I've got a couple of validation frameworks here. Fluent Validation, that's the one that I use. That's my favorite because I've got quite a lot of control over things like multiple dependencies of parameters. So you can set it that if someone has chosen when they received something, then you can have something else to, like a signature that has to go with it. And that validation is dependent on 2 or 3, etc. things. But you've also got within .NET Core built-in data annotations and validation attributes, which you can use for your validation, and that binds to your UI as well, really well. Hardly any coding required, and it's actually getting a lot more powerful as well. They're adding a load of things to the data annotations that help you to sort of be more granular and refined on the parameters that you're validating against. Any questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. With your validation, and then say after that you do the business logic.
Yep.
What I found is that every time that I have that validation and then I do the business logic, you kind of double up the sort of database, data access, and some processing.
Yep.
What strategies would you recommend to avoid, say, doubling up that processing and data fetching?
Yeah, great question. So you're asking what we can get rid of to prevent ourselves from doing the same thing repetitively for the same transaction.
Yeah, like to say generally any sort of business transaction, if you're going to validate it, you end up in the validation kind of doing most of that transaction, but not persisting it, just ensuring the data is correct. And then once that passes, then then you repeat everything again.
Yeah,
in actual
yeah.
transaction scope.
Yeah. So this comes down to risk appetite. You don't have to do validation at every step. You don't have to. And if the application is suffering performance-wise because you're doing that, then you need to evaluate which points using threat modeling as to which points are the ones that are high risk. So you don't have to do it all, and your organization or your client will make that decision with a risk assessment on what should be done and where it should be done. But doing it as much as possible is going to be more secure.
There's also things you can do, like having caching strategies
For sure.
your data
Yeah.
as well, and just making sure that you're not persisting the client side of the cache, you're persisting the validated version of that cache.
That's right. Yeah. So So caching certain things in your server. It depends on your system, ultimately. But yeah, there are concepts and tools that you can use, like caching, that will help you to not rely on round trips to your database, for example.
Yeah, or you can move, for example, everything where you do all this heavy logic with the actual app services and business. You can move them to the demi zone, the military zone, where no one can get there. But if the call is going through some services of authorization and your authentication happening, and then the authorization is up to you. Authorization could be even cached.
Well, I'll give you a really quick example, not to belabor this point, but let's say you've got a shopping cart, and you've got this calculated shopping cart that the user is checking out. Then you go to execute that order.
Mm-hmm.
A whole bunch of products and there's discount codes and stuff that apply. So the point that you execute that shopping cart and to make that transaction happen, you have to kind of go and recalculate the whole shopping cart at the point that you're going to make the order, just to make sure that the data, the price points, and the discount codes are all live. And I've just found that's what I'm referring to. And I found I'm actually duplicating the processing both in the validation and then when I go to actually do the processing itself.
Yeah.
So I guess caching would help.
Sure.
You don't have to validate at the controller layer. You can, if you're doing
Yeah, well, I'm talking the business logic layer, past that whole.
Yeah, exactly. So you're validating the data at the business business domain validation at the business logic layer. If you're doing validation against the appropriate type or serialization, deserialization, then it goes up at the controller level. Is that what you're talking about? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't need to do it twice. You just do it once at the appropriate spot.
Yeah, exactly. Do it once at the appropriate spot, but use a risk assessment or threat model to decide what spot that is.
Right. But then I guess you want to avoid assumptions at the point where you're actually going to do the financial transaction. You want to avoid assumptions that that were given to you as part of the parameter set or the arguments that this was the price of that item calculated with some discount code. Was that really true? Was that
Sure.
really?
Yeah.
That's the point. That's where you have to read anyway. Yeah, but point taken. It's a risk thing.
Not to belabor the point too long, but I think you do have to accept that time is a dimension, and so the client and the server are mostly disconnected in a web application, so you do have to revalidate things to make sure you don't introduce inconsistencies into your system like you're talking about. So I think that is part of
That's kind of
ensuring correctness in your system, and so you do have to do some of that, right?
And don't be too worried about that double validation thing until it's actually really a problem. Like if you're trying to code around that right at the start before you've got users in the system, then you're just prematurely optimizing things that don't really make sense yet. So wait until it's an issue and then try to figure out your way around it, I would think.
Yeah, great question though. Thanks for that. Any more questions? No? Okay. So moving on to testing. Who loves testing? That was a quick hand. Like, oh no, maybe I shouldn't put it.
Only one in the room.
I test all my code, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's like cleaning your teeth, testing, right? Like no one likes cleaning their teeth, but
Yeah.
you know you should do it. So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
do it, right?
That's right. As developers, we're notoriously good at testing. I'll go on record as saying, but it should be something that we do, like you said. We should be doing it, and we should be using this as part of our CI/CD processes. So testing without automation is just you're opening yourself up to not doing it. It's true, unfortunately, but it's super important. And we've got different types of tests as well. So we've got unit tests, which we all do. We've got 100% coverage. I've spoken to each of you individually, and you've all said this. But we've also got other types of tests. So unit tests aren't really going to give us any security unless that's what they are testing. But you also have integration tests, end-to-end tests, subcutaneous tests, UI tests, and penetration tests, load tests, and various other tests. There's a lot of tests. It's as if we needed like an entire department to do it for us. But we need to do this. We need to have this as part of our process. And I was talking to good Brendan earlier about the divide between dev and ops, and then the introduction of DevOps as a separate entity. We've also got DevSecOps, they sort of floating about as well. And we kind of push it against someone else to do sometimes. But if we're going to be secure, then we need to have this testing in place all of the time. When I spoke before about the by default authorizing your endpoints and allowing anonymous as an exception, we need to test against that as well, and we need to have that in the CI/CD processes so that we don't erroneously let that into our systems. And that's where this comes into play. And we also need to have that accountability so that if you're in a large organization working somewhere that is has governance and policies and so on, and they get audited, we also need to have that in place. And you can have a stage gate process, for example, where certain things have to be thoroughly documented and defined before it moves on to the next part. And that just increases your security. It doesn't make... Actually, I said for this talk that I'd make your applications bulletproof, and you can't, which is unfortunate. And actually, one of the things that when I started learning about cybersecurity that really kept me up at night was the fact that cybersecurity professionals don't stop attacks. That's what they said. They don't stop attacks. That's not what they're there for. They're there to slow them down. Because if you slow them down enough, they get bored and move on to something else. But just the fact that we've got known vulnerabilities as a term, that means that we've got plenty that we don't know. We can't defend against those until we know them. There's actually a role in cybersecurity called threat hunter. And if you're like me, you're picturing Rambo, like turning up to work. It is not. That it just looks like me, or any of you. But their job is to go and find those before they are a real thing. We've got 0-day vulnerabilities as well. And all of these things mean that we can't be 100% secure in anything that we do unless our application's not doing anything, and then there's nothing to attack. However, moving on to some resources that are going to help you. In fact, are they resources? These are actually, ignore this. I'm going to move on because that's a slide in a wrong place. But there are testing resources that you can use that are going to help you to create your pen tests. Because if you're having an internal pen test, which, depending on your organization, is something that you could look into, that can run as part of your CI/CD process. Don't run it all the time. You only want to run a pen test when you're introducing new features, that sort of thing. But have an internal pen test that you can run. However, you do need to have a third-party pen test as well. So one of the resources that should have been in that slide is pen testers. Cybersecurity professionals is definitely, in testing, a resource that we can all make use of. As organizations, I suppose. Individually, when you're at home, maybe not, because they're quite expensive. But that's a resource that you can use for security testing. As I spoke about before, there's the Z attack proxy. That's a tool that you can use, and there are a whole load of other tools that you can use. Things that you can do, replay attacks. So you can use Burp Suite or Fiddler to interrogate the traffic. So when you get a request that goes to your server, you can do it again. You can manipulate some of the data and you can do it again. And there's tools that allow you to set some parameters and define some rules, and it will just go through it and do it again and again and again. And they're great ways to test your security, your posture. There's something called fuzzing, which is just garbage. It just sends garbage to your endpoints to see how it reacts. So it might be looking for overflow and any information that it can gather from, unexpected results. So those are the resources that I didn't put in that slide. Any questions on testing? Yes.
Have you had any experience using like Metasploit?
Yes. Metasploit. Yeah. So when I'm doing the things that I shouldn't be. No, that's wrong. When I'm doing the things that are sort of exploring what can be done, which is where it became an interest for me initially, before I became a developer, back in the 90s. Oh God, that makes me so old. Back in the 90s, yeah, I would try and do things that I perhaps shouldn't, just to see what I could do. There was nothing malicious about it. It was just I would get my friends to click on an application, and then I could open their CD drawer on their tower. That makes me even older, doesn't it? So yes, Metasploit is a great example of massive tooling that you can use to do every step of ethical hacking. Reconnaissance, so your enumeration and finding open ports and that sort of thing. Yeah, that's a great tool to. I don't know, you probably can automate it, but certainly something that you can look into for attacking your own application for sure. And there's quite a few others as well that do different things. So Nmap is your basic first step. That's in Metasploit as well. And Nmap is just going to be port sniffing. But understanding all of those steps is fun. It's fun to do. And you get to understand how an attacker is going to, if they target you, how they're going to proceed. And there's a whole bunch of tools at their disposal like that, and various other Trojan creators and so on. And then there's social engineering as well. So there's things that we, as software devs, can't possibly defend against, like physical attacks. There's a term called rubber hosing in cybersecurity. Rubber hosing is to extract information through coercion or torture. They've got a term for it. It happens that often. They need a term for it. So yeah, great suggestion. Metasploit is a good framework to use. Any more questions on testing? Another one.
As a defense against rubber hosing, have you considered taking up martial arts?
Funny you should mention that. I got to brown black belt before I moved to Australia. So yeah, my entire family did martial arts. My daughter, who's 10, she was 2 weeks away from doing her black belt test before we moved, and then she hasn't picked it up since we got here. So that was a good 6 years.
I imagine they're all web developers then.
Yeah. So there's two things that I get my daughters to do: martial arts and then web development. That's it. So yeah, web development is so that they can do my job later or now, if they could, and martial arts is to stop boyfriends. All right, any more questions? I'm looking blankly. I haven't got my glasses on. I can't really see you. Okay, so these are software composition analysis tools. Spat that one out. These are things that make you better. They really should. The examples that I've got up here are all tools that I've used. SonarQube is fantastic. because it tells you vulnerabilities in your code, but it also tells you how bad your code is. Gives you code smells and duplications and unused parameters and all sorts of stuff. And it's really good. And you can set it up into your CI/CD process. In the previous role I had, we had it so that it would message us on Teams when it was done and tell us how rubbish the code was, which, just like the product owner, really. But they are really good at making you understand vulnerabilities, understand the things that you shouldn't be doing. And they're all a little bit different, actually. So the blue one, that's Fortify, and that reads your source code. And Checkmarks reads your binaries. And Sneak lives on the cloud, and it's really good. I use Sneak at the moment, and it's phenomenal because it emails me reports, and it also does pull requests for me. When it finds a vulnerability, it will fix it and do a pull request. So, if they combine with ChatGPT, then we're out of a job. So yeah, they're really, really useful tools, and this is something that you'd have in your development process. And setting them up is generally quite easy. Sneak is definitely easy. All you have to do is give it access to your repo, and it has connections on quite a lot. Obviously, I'm using Azure DevOps, which it has access to, but it can use anything, GitHub and AWS and everything else. And then Qualys is in Azure. I'll talk about that in a bit. And the other things that they can do are on the screen there. So you can identify licenses for third parties. So when you've got the different types of licenses, it can find those and warn you of changes or if it's not a good license to have. And it can enforce organization policies. And as I said, it makes it easy to automate. And you can even have that as rules in your CI/CD pipeline that your number of critical risks and high risks has to be 0, or any other rule configuration you wanted to have within your organization. So I did say that Sneak does do reports and stuff. So this is an example of a report that it emails you. I've obviously set this up to demonstrate that it can show you some highs and stuff. And it tells you about how many dependencies, and it tells you a whole load of other stuff that I deleted off the bottom. But then on the right-hand side there, we've got the pull request it did for me last year. And it found that there was a package that was slightly out of date, but there was a vulnerability in that older version. So it just automatically did a very, very basic pull request. It was just changing the version of a package, which I was happy to have against my name because that was one for me that day. But yeah, that is, if I was to actually put these in order, I've not, by the way, not put these in any sort of order other than OWASP at the front. But this, if I was going to rank it, SCA Tools would be right up there. Okay, halfway point. Any questions on SCA Tools? Yes?
The Sneak one, is it deployed somewhere in the cloud and you just give access to your repo? Or?
On Sneak? Yeah. So it's a cloud-based, there's a few cloud-based, in fact, Sonar has got a cloud-based tool as well. And yes, you have to, you can give it a personal access token. So obviously that's time-bound, and then it will access your repo. I suggest you're maybe thinking that maybe that's not secure.
Kind of secure, but
Yeah.
your repo
Yeah.
someone else, like,
Yeah.
kind of doing security talk, but it's
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Maybe I shouldn't do it. No, there's an element of trust, right? So Sneak is quite popular, so is Sonar, and they have governance. So yes, there's possibly going to be an attack on Sneak, but if they're doing things properly, then my personal access token isn't going to be accessible to anybody else, and it's also tied to that connection, as I'm led to believe.
yeah. But it's more like, never trust clients, never trust third parties.
I think I'd trust an application more than I trust a person. And then dogs at the top. Dogs, and then applications, and then people. Yes?
Sorry, if anyone else has got a question. The thing about licensing I thought was interesting there. So are you saying that some of those tools you can say, like, I'm happy to accept code, third-party libraries and frameworks with these licenses,
Yeah.
with these
Yeah.
licenses snuck in, like, let me know, and that might break your build or something. So
Yeah.
if you for example, if you accidentally took a GPL v3 dependency in your web app, and you don't want to do that because of the license restrictions of GPL v3, then it can tell you stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that all of those products? Or?
No, and I don't know which ones, because that, for me, it's theory so far. I've not actually implemented it.
Okay.
But I have read up quite extensively on the fact that they have brought this in I think Sonar. There's a product by Sonar that does that, and various others.
The thing that customers will worry about is that you're accidentally exposing them to risk by using open source libraries, and they say stuff like, don't use any open source, which is ludicrous, right?
Yeah.
You could never write an app really in that situation. So maybe this is like a mid-ground where you could satisfy their concerns about copyleft licensing and that kind of stuff without having to like throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, some of those tools, or some SCA tools, will enforce policies, on the licensing that's on the third-party packages, which is pretty powerful. Any more questions? Can't remember what we were talking about. SCA Tools. Any more questions on SCA Tools? No. All right, cool. So Zero Trust. This one, strap in, because this one's a long one. So I did actually I gave a talk on Zero Trust last week, so I can remember most of it, and I'll indulge you now. So Zero Trust came about by this guy, John Kindervag, a long time ago, actually, 2010. He was trying to alleviate the inherited trust model within networks. So certainly when I started development, perimeter security was security. So you had a firewall, and I've been in a conversation with a principal engineer who said, well, if they can get past the firewall, they deserve our data. Yeah. It was a while ago, and he was drunk. No, he wasn't. So Zero Trust came in because of this inherited trust. So when you bypass that main perimeter, any transactions within the network were assumed to be legitimate. And Zero Trust came in to prevent that and sort of rewrite how we consider trust. Now, with Zero Trust, there's a lot written about it since 2010. And depending on who you read, there might be 5 concepts. There might be 6 pillars. There might be 7 tenets. Sometimes there's 8 something else's. And Microsoft have got their own Zero Trust model, and there's 3 principles. So I like that one because it's fewer things to remember. But there are pillars within the Zero Trust idea. Now, when John Kindervag created it or wrote about it, it was networking. So it was just around how we transfer data, transactions. But since then, it's moved on. We've got Zero Trust architecture. We've got Zero Trust network access, and that's to replace VPNs. And then we've got Zero Trust models and Zero Trust other things. But within Zero Trust, they look at user, device, network infrastructure, application data, visibility and analytics together, and then orchestration and automation as one that usually gets left off. But on these 5 concepts that he came up with, the one that speaks to me the most is change how you think about trust. Because you can apply it, and the talk I did last week was about applying it to your application development. And you can apply the principles from Microsoft that we're going to talk about now to pretty much everything you do. One slide that I did leave out was a real-world analogy with a bank. and I'll just discuss it briefly with you now. If you go into a bank, I did a floor plan and everything. If you go into a bank, there's attributes that you've got to have in order to gain access. Those are, don't wear a motorcycle helmet, don't be brandishing a gun. They're pretty much it. You can walk in through the front door, as long as it's open, I suppose. But just because you got into the building doesn't mean that you gain access to the vault. You gain access to the lobby. And there's areas, offices with data, and there's the teller area where they've got access. Their access is higher than your privilege. But even they, if they go into the vault, have to have their access granted, and it's time bound and it's audited. And if you were to go into the lobby and you brandish a concealed weapon suddenly, then everything shuts down and you definitely can't get any further. And that's the analogy that I gave. And I went a step further than that. And I said, if that was a training bank and they're trying out different, security and stuff, and it's easier to breach, you might then get access to the monopoly money in the vault. But that's no good. But if the training bank was next door to the real bank, you might be able to move through, an air vent or something into the real bank. And that is part of Zero Trust, where you separate your resources. But I do talk about that in a minute. I just thought I'd share that with you. So the first principle in Zero Trust with Microsoft is verify explicitly. So an identity, when we think of identity, we think of a person, but it could be a device or an application. And we need to verify explicitly. So every time you verify something or someone, you need to make sure that they are or it is what they pertain to be. And that can be done with multi-factor authentication, can be done with location, device health, etc. And we use as many data points as we can to verify that they are who they say they are. The second is the principle of least privilege, and you probably know this one, or maybe you've at least heard of it. This is the idea that we don't give too much access for the task that's required. So if, for example, a user needs to change their name, we don't give them admin access. And that kind of makes sense, but we can go a bit further than that and do time-bound as well, so that we can grant access between certain date and time, so that doesn't get abused. And then on top of that, we've also got the ability to review access as well and get rid of any that doesn't need to be done. And the last one is assume breach. And do you remember when I said earlier that we can't stop attacks? This takes it even further by assuming that we have been attacked. And when you get attacked, you want to make sure that that breach doesn't spread. They don't get any further. So we contain it. And that mindset change as to how you design your architecture, your application, your organization will help you to be more secure. And that's the whole point of Zero Trust. I'm going to rattle through these because there's a lot. So network and resource segmentation, this is what I just talked about with the bank. So we can see here we've got a development environment, a UAT environment, and a production environment, and they're separate subscriptions. So there's no way that anyone can move from one to the other without very defined access to do that. And then within those, obviously, you've got network security groups and application security groups and resource groups, etc., to segment that.
You obviously would restore your production database into a pre-prod environment for purposes.
Sure. Definitely. Never happened ever. So conditional access, which I've just discussed, is using risk-based policies. So within Azure, you can set some rules about. So they use location as one of the examples. If you were to log into your system at 10 a.m. in Sydney and then 5 minutes later in Perth, it can pick that up and say no one can run that fast. Or fly, I suppose. You'd fly, you wouldn't run. But no one can move that fast to be able to do that. So it would flag that up as a risk, and you can configure as to what you do with that. You could reject it because it's not possible, or you could require multi-factor authentication again, or you could approve it, I suppose. But there are multiple things that you can do in this area, conditional access, that allows you to enforce what users, this is user access to resource, what they can do and what requirements they need to satisfy in order to do it. The risk-based stuff, like the location and I think device health and things like that, that's part of the P2 license, so it's a bit expensive. But then on top of that, you've got access reviews and reporting and monitoring, which help your overall security on your organization. And then there's privileged identity management, which is the time-bound part that I described earlier. So you can set, on this example, it's highlighting that you can set someone eligible for a date period. And that means that they have to click a button to request the access, and then it gets granted. But that's all part of auditing and reporting. And then you can review those and remove any unnecessary access. So that was Zero Trust pretty quickly. Any questions on Zero Trust?
Yeah, I've got a question. Is containerization an accepted practice for resource segmentation from a Zero Trust perspective?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But you have to have robust controls around it to, because it really, Zero Trust is more about, they describe it as any transaction is treated as if it came from an untrusted network. So yes, but any movement in and around that needs to apply the Zero Trust principles. Yeah, I had a question about air-gapped networks, whether that, and yes, the answer is yes. Any time that any transaction is going on, it doesn't matter if it's not connected to the rest of the world, you still need to, if you're doing Zero Trust, you still need to have all those policies in place. One thing worth noting though is if you're going to do Zero Trust, you have to do Zero Trust, like fully, because anything that you don't do Zero Trust in is just a big risk, and it makes the rest of it kind of worthless. That's what they say. I don't agree fully, but I do understand that if you're going to do it, you need to do it in full. Any more questions? All right, great. So monitoring and automated response. This is something that can help you in your application development because maintenance is a thing. You know, once you've built your application, you still need it to run successfully. So Azure Monitor is a product that's on Azure that allows you to get all of that data in one place, and you can do your logs and analytics and get your metrics and get your nice pretty dashboards. But it does help you to see things like spikes in activity, which might be an attack. And you can take that a step further and have alerts set. So you can have your rules for alerting that can wake you up in the middle of the night to tell you that there's lots of people on your application, your site. But it's very useful to have alerts, to be able to know when things are happening or when things aren't happening, probably more importantly, and to be able to mitigate any risk that represents. Anyone use Azure Monitor? Yeah. What are your thoughts?
I thought it was good. Probably not as big a fan of app insights as Monitor, but yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's free and easy to use, right?
Yeah, that's right. And they kind of push it quite a lot in Azure because it's not just your applications; it's your entire organization, your system. So you can get your metrics on down to resource level or any level above that as well. If you wanted to go further and automate things, you can use Sentinel, which uses data connections, and these are not just Azure. You can have this from AWS and GCP as well. And it gets all of that data, and it gives you advanced analytics, and then it gives you the option of playbooks. Playbooks are automated procedures that are hit with a given configuration. So yeah, it uses advanced analytics, and it uses threat intelligence. So the Microsoft threat intelligence is pretty good. They hit, I think, last I read, it was upwards of 1.5 billion transactions a day that goes through their machine learning model. And that just allows it to identify threats in near real time. So then you've got your automated response, and that actually also goes into compliance as well. So if you're trying to get ISO 27001, Sentinel is going to help you to achieve that. So yeah, also if you want to read that, because it's a lot of words, but they like to do acronyms, obviously. So it's SEAM and SAW. If you hear that, then it means something something management and something something response, and it describes automation and logging data. Right, that was a quick one. Any questions around monitoring and automation? I think you're all still awake. That's good.
I'm still awake. The image, sorry, I don't have my glasses on either. The image in the bottom right corner, is that kind of some kind of Logic App style thing that it
Yes.
has like a WYSIWYG
Yeah.
response thing? Or?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It uses Logic Apps to run the playbooks.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of your workflow and separating based on outputs and so on. Yeah. Right, we're nearly there. So hosting configuration and security. I spoke before about misconfiguration being a bad thing. And one of my favorite services, if you can have one in Azure, is Defender for Cloud. I really love Defender for Cloud because it really helps with your security posture in a number of ways. They've got the secure score, which kind of gives you a baseline of how secure your application or your environment is. So obviously the higher that is, the better. But it also gives you recommendations. There is a caveat, right? So it gives you recommendations. The first one is it orders them by how much you're going to increase your secure score, okay? So generally that is the best way, but that might not be the focus of your organization. There might be other things that won't increase your secure score as much, but are more compliant with ISO 27001 or HIPAA or GDPR or whatever it is that you're aiming to get. So there's that. When you're looking at the recommendations, just make sure that it's in the order that you expect it to be. The second one is the recommendations that they give you. Some of them have quick fixes, and you can click it and it fixes it. And the caveat is, it's Azure. It's going to cost you a load of money. So just be aware of what it's actually doing, because it will tell you, but yeah, you can rack up a bill pretty quickly by fixing everything. And then the second thing that I really enjoy about Defender for Cloud is the regulatory compliance. And I've said it a few times already. If you are going for that industry standard, then this is going to help you to get it, because it gives you, again, the recommendations to do it, and it gives you that audit about how well you're doing, your green ticks or the green bar or whatever it is, highlights any of the resources that are not compliant, and again, how you can fix those. So that's really good for enterprises who are trying to get that, that standard. The other thing that's part of Defender for Cloud, or regulatory compliance part, that's, you have to spend money for that as well. That's an additional license. But the baseline Defender for Cloud is free, and that includes Qualys, which is the SCA tool that I talked about before. Or no, I didn't talk about it, I pointed to a picture of it. That's part of Defender for Cloud. It will scan for free and do all the SCA Tools stuff as well. That's all packaged up into this, and your Defender for Cloud is across your subscription, across your tenant, and you can split it out into whichever level you want, so you can have it for a subscription. So it's a really powerful tool. And then the other tool that I like is Azure Front Door. So there's actually two that are kind of similar. There's this and there's Application Gateway. But Azure Front Door is the global CDN. So if you're creating a website that's used across the world, this is going to use the Azure backbone to make sure that it's available or at its availablest wherever someone is, which is great, but it's also got some other stuff too. And my favorite is the SSL termination and auto rotation, because it deals with it for you. You don't have to register or create certificates and remember when they're expiring and then go through the pain of having to put it up again. It just does it all for you. So you don't have any of that downtime for when you do forget, or even worse, you keep uptime but have no security. It just manages that, which I think is fantastic because I forget everything. The other thing it's got, which Application Gateway also has, is access to the Web Application Firewall. So I spoke about this before in OWASP. They've got their core rule set. This is the Azure Web Application Firewall, and you can set up all your policies for that. It's going to protect you against denial of service. It's going to protect you against injection attacks. And this is probably one of the reasons why injection fell off the top spot on OWASP, because we've got tools that deal with it now, and attackers are sick to death of hitting web application firewalls, so they're choosing something else that's an attack avenue. The other thing that it does is session affinity. So if you're load balanced within your regions, then it allows your users to stay on the same machine so that you don't lose any of their data as well. That is all I'd like to say about those two, so I'll take some questions on those two products. Or anything else. I mean, there's obviously other versions in other areas, but I know about these two, so I can answer those questions, if you've got any. Oh, no, yeah, go on.
I just feel like I'm asking all the questions, sorry. The first product that you showed, I'm just clarifying this for the room, it's the basic version is like 100% free, right?
Yes, yeah.
And if you're hosting anything in Azure, like if you're hosting infrastructure in Azure or you're hosting web apps in Azure or any apps in Azure, you can literally get a security assessment with recommendations for free.
Yep.
There's basically no reason not to do
Absolutely.
not prioritising that as important to your project, not to do it, right?
Yeah, so just to
That's what I
reiterate,
love about that product.
it's free.
It's just free.
You should do it.
Tons of useful shit
Yeah.
just for free, and it's really well presented.
Yep.
So it's like, and I'm just reinforcing that point. Like if you're doing stuff in Azure and you're not taking advantage of that, you're missing out on just free gold that you could just get for free and use, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
The free one is often enough, but if you do want to add in regulatory compliance and other scans, the cost goes up by, I think it's something like $15 per VM, and the SQL stuff is based on transactions, and it can get kind of expensive, but I suppose everyone's trying to put a price on security.
It also finds some really obvious mistakes that you've made that you've just overlooked, and you'll feel like a total, just like, oh, I'm an idiot, I can't believe that VM has a public IP and 3389 is open to the internet, so that's why everyone's, Nmap scanning stuff and constantly trying to like crack into my VM or whatever, and you're like, well, that's pretty dumb, I probably shouldn't do that. Like just, it's easy to make mistakes, and this will just find all of those elementary mistakes like that and put them at the top of the list.
Yep.
And then 2 minutes later you just fix them and you're done, right? So,
Yeah, I mean the time thing around it.
Someone else, but I'm sure I could do something that dumb easily myself, and this saves you from doing really dumb stuff for free, basically.
When you set it up, it does take about 24 hours to scan everything, but after that, it gives you all this information on the things that you've missed out or overlooked, which is great.
You end up in a queue, basically, right?
Yeah.
And then eventually your scan goes through. Yeah.
Right, we're very, very nearly there. You don't realise how close we are. Right, 3 slides. So this last point, penultimate point, I suppose, is educate continuously. So I like this quote knowledge is the only asset that increases when shared, because COVID isn't an asset. But I enjoy it. This is why I do this. This is why I talk to you guys. I come into this room and think that most of you know more than me about application development. But I don't mind coming up here and talking to you, because anything that I can pass on to you that is value to you is great. And that's why I've said educate, because I've done it as a verb as well. So you can educate yourself and go and have courses and learn. And you can do what I'm doing, which is sharing knowledge. And the reason that we need to do this is that, especially in our industry, it moves so quickly. So we need to constantly learn. I worked at an organisation that, this is back when I started thinking about security. And the security team there told me that this was an international organisation. And they had an international security team. So they were based around the globe, but they were part of one team. They looked after the organisation. They had, I can't remember what it was called, they had an application that had all of the vulnerabilities that were known to them. Who wants to guess how many known vulnerabilities there were for this organisation, international organisation? Any guesses? Just looking for a number. You don't get a prize, so you can be wrong if you like.
I'll start with 100,000.
100,000. So if you got to work in your security team and went, right, how am I going to prioritise these 100,000, amongst the 5 of us? It'd be pretty difficult, right? Daunting. 1.5 million known vulnerabilities. That's why they had a threat hunter, because they needed to know what else there was. But that number, who can comprehend that number as like, oh, which one shall I pick today? No cherry picking there, is there? You just get what you're given. But yeah, so it moves very quickly, and attackers are opportunistic. So they'll take things like COVID and they'll make the most of it. And they'll jump onto trends within their community. They've got a great community, unfortunately, and they share their knowledge as well and their tooling. So when ransomware became a thing, everyone was doing it, and it became a pandemic. So yeah, we need to educate constantly because of that evolving landscape. We also need to keep up with regulations and compliance. And obviously, we need to make sure that we're coding securely as well. So we know how to defend or code defensively against threats. And that last point, security is for everyone, is something that I've been saying quite a lot, because I've spoken to a lot of developers and I've interviewed developers for positions, and I always ask them security questions, and sometimes I'm horrified, visually, when they answer certain ways, about how security is not for them because another team does it. But it's not just us, it's everybody. We all need to, even outside of work, you need to be secure in your private life and your personal information as well. So we also need to make sure that we are up to date on what's happening in work and outside of work. All right, so I did promise 10, and this is number 10. You've got to listen to them, because we have a terrible relationship with them as developers. And if we listen to them, then they might be more willing to help us. And if they're more willing to help us, then they're going to make us better, and we're going to make more secure applications. And now I can take any further questions that you might have. Yes? Oh, thank you. Thank you. I got a sticker from a Microsoft security advocate. This is not related to your very kind compliment, but it's something that I want to just leave you guys with. This sticker had a quote on it, and it said, "That's out of scope, said no attacker ever." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stuart. It was a very interesting and entertaining talk. I really enjoyed that. Thank you again for everyone coming along.
Next month we have a few things that are potentially about to lock in, but we can't advertise them just yet. You should see them listed fairly soon, hopefully. Maybe some things around either some AWS deployment stuff, or I think we're also looking at some potential database stuff as well. So, Todd?
I just noticed a question from the Twitch stream.
Yep.
So I thought sorry to cut in.
Yeah.
Before we take mics off in the stream.
Yep.
The question is, when developing an application from scratch, at what stage do you recommend security be discussed?
At the beginning, and every point throughout that life cycle. It shouldn't be, we have tended to have security discussions towards the end when we think we're finished, which just extends the development time, the process. So yeah, at the beginning, and this is sometimes doesn't get a lot of buy-in, because you get designers who want to design these things that are fantastic for users, and then I'll say, but that's not very secure, and they'll, yeah, well, let's just get through this process. Now we need to discuss it at the beginning, otherwise you're just going to waste time later on.
That's all the questions we have on the stream.
Excellent. Thank you, Stuart.